So recently, Retrobird came out with a video not too long ago about Sega versus Nintendo. And I thought it was very interesting, especially since in my view, I see him more on the line of the Sega type fan. And well, I'll let you watch the video to kind of see what his stance is, and I don't want to spoil it at all, but it was very thought-provoking, and I enjoy a lot of Retrobird's videos. He's very entertaining. I love his banana jokes. But he brings up a lot of good topics. This one especially, since I see and follow a lot of YouTubers who are Nintendo fans. So finding the smaller groups who are more Sega fans to me are more so the people I try to follow more, I guess. Especially since there's so few. And for me personally, it was growing up kind of interesting because I was that Sega fan when I was younger. I really didn't like Nintendo, which is interesting more for the fact that, and this is something that I guess not many people realize, my first console that I really touched, aside from my uncle's Atari 2600, was a Nintendo Entertainment System. I remember it kind of fondly. My mom brought it home for my dad as a Father's Day gift, and it was the not the one with Rob the Robot or anything, but had it packed in Mario Brothers and Duck Hunt with the Zapper. And that was technically my first console. And I loved the heck out of it. I played Mario. We had Mario 3. We went to the rental store all the time. I'd come back with stuff. Yoshi Cookie was one that I remember renting a lot and trying out various other ones, like a lot of the Disney ones. And then I'd go to garage sales. Mom would pick me up a couple used games or whatever, or if they were on sale from the video stores, they were phasing them out and the Super Nintendo was coming in. Because we got it later in the NES's life, just before the Genesis came out, actually. So we had, I had Chip and Dale's Rescue Rangers, Spy vs. Spy, Zelda, Mario Duck Hunt, and I want to say at one point I had Battletoads. I remember renting that one quite a bit too. And then when I'd go to my grandparents' place, they would rent Nintendo games, and then we'd bring the system along, and we'd have it hooked up there from time to time. But what really got me going was when the kid down the street from me had a Genesis, and he invited me over. And he's like, hey, check out this system, and it was Sonic the Hedgehog. And it was the first game. And I was hooked immediately. Like, I was like, oh, this feels so much faster than Mario. He's kind of slow. He's that pudgy little guy in the jumpsuit, and you're just hitting blocks and bouncing on enemies. Here, you're rolling around loop-de-loops, you're busting through robots and everything like that. And it just really grasped me. Something about it, I was like, wow. And then the whole advertising that you saw, it was like aimed more towards the teenagers. And I was maybe 9 at the time. So for me, it was like, yeah, I want to be like the big kids. I want to have the cool console and those fast games that were more meant for the teens and the older people. I don't want this Nintendo stuff that's, you know, kind of wonky and family friendly type thing. I wanted this hedgehog with the attitude. And that's what really stuck in my mind. And it wasn't, for the longest time, I begged and I pleaded with my parents to get me a Genesis. And then one year, I kind of remember this Christmas kind of fondly, because I felt so disappointed. I opened up all of my gifts, and there was no Sega Genesis. And I remember being kind of upset about it, because I had gone to the whole thing of cutting out the ads, because my parents were like, well, let us know what you want for Christmas and what you want Santa to bring you and everything. And they'd hand us the ads, and we could circle or cut out what we wanted. So my sister and I would sit, and we'd cut out the stuff, and I had always cut out the Sega Genesis, and they'd always have little characters like Knuckles, because at the time, Sonic 3 was just released, and it was the big holiday season for all that stuff. And I really wanted that, and I remember having a little pegboard, and I would pin the cutouts of the Genesis and Knuckles and Tails and Sonic, and I would have that on my pegboard, and then like little ads for different Sega games, like there was Vector Man, Toe Jam, and Earl, all those other ones that were coming out that I just thought looking at the cover was really cool, and I'd have those pinned. But after that Christmas, and I opened up all the gifts, and we went to my grandparents' place for Christmas, and I was kind of down. Like, yeah, I had great gifts. My parents didn't have a lot of money. Weren't really well off when I was younger, so I was grateful for what I had. I would get like small Nerf guns, or little things that I kind of needed when I was a kid at that age. Um, and Thinking back on it, when we got back from my grandmother's grandparents' place, I should say, my dad made us wait in the car, and he ran inside. And when we got in, there was one single gift underneath the tree that was left that wasn't unopened, that wasn't there when we opened gifts that morning. So he made a big deal that, hey, look, Santa forgot a present. We should open it. And of course, the tag said from Santa on it. And my sister and I opened it up because we were told we both have to open it. It wasn't just for one of us. And it was a Sega Game Gear with Sonic 2 included. So we didn't get the Genesis, but we did get the Game Gear. And that was my first handheld, my first Sega system that the family had that we shared. Of course, I was the one who played it the most. But my parents had gotten that, and then over the years, for like my birthday and such, I was allowed to pick up one game, because games back then were $30 for the Genesis, so it was expensive, but not as expensive as the Genesis games, because some of the Genesis games back then were still $60-$70, not including like Phantasy Star, which was like in the $100 range at the time when it came out. So that was cool, and I had that Game Gear all the way up until about 7th grade. And then that's when some twins, Jay and Jimmy, and I remember their names for some reason, I hung out with them, and they came to me when I was at my locker during break between classes, and they were like, hey, we got something for you, come follow us. And they're twins, so I followed them to their locker, and they pulled out this sack. It was just a paper sack, and they handed it to me, and they go, our parents got us a Super Nintendo, we no longer need this. And I was like, okay, and I opened it up, and inside was a Model 2 Sega Genesis, and it included a loose cart of Sonic 2. So I finally got my Genesis years later, eventually, and I still have that Sega Genesis and that copy of Sonic 2, and it kind of grew from there. But that was my thing, and the Nintendo, unfortunately, met its demise. It stopped playing games, and my mom ended up selling it at a garage sale. We didn't know what was wrong with it, so we marked it as saying, it may or may not play games, but we, if you push down on it just right, it would read it. Back then, I had no idea that it was just the pins that needed to be replaced, which you can now do with those. But back then, I had no idea. I was, not even a teenager. My parents didn't know anything much about electronics, so they just got rid of it. I don't even remember how much it went for, but they ended up selling the NES along with all the games that we had, which was only like 4 or 5 games at the time. We didn't have many. Again, we mostly rented games that I would play, rather than buy them outright, or if we found them at a cheap somewhere else, like a pawn shop. So that was kind of how I got hooked on Sega stuff, and from there, obviously, you can see all the figures and statues and stuff, and I just started collecting Sega stuff. Tasmania, it kind of expanded from there with more Game Gear games, and then slowly friends would let me buy on the cheap Genesis games from them that they no longer wanted, or they just gifted them to me because they're like, oh, I'm getting the Nintendo 64, I have a Super Nintendo, I know you're into this Sega stuff, I don't need it anymore, or whatever. My parents don't think they're going to get anything from the garage sale, so you can just have it. And that's how I accumulated quite a handful of a lot of the games that I had up until my college year, which was after the Dreamcast had been released, which was my first real console that I purchased up with my own money. I purposely got a job at 16 and saved up just for the Dreamcast when it was coming out. I wouldn't actually get a Saturn until my first year of college. So this was about 2002, 2003. And I remember it was up towards Milwaukee at a used game store, and they were selling a Saturn with some with Nights into Dreams, which actually was the first that came with it. And that was my first Saturn game. And I purchased it for $25. I got one controller, the console, and the game. And my girlfriend at the time was kind of like, really, you're into that? It's an old system. I'm like, yeah, I think it's cool. I've always wanted a Saturn, because even back before the Dreamcast, it was way too expensive. And it wasn't something that was obtainable to me. And I've kind of continued that. So now that I have the full Dreamcast US releases and everything, and it's been kind of a keepsake for me. That's kind of my story on how I got into the Sega stuff. I joked with friends that I don't like Nintendo, which is true. I played GoldenEye on the N64, and Mario Kart when it came out. All my friends had the Nintendo stuff. I always had the Sega stuff. And I'd go over and I'd play the games. I wasn't completely against them. They were fun. I still admit that there are fun Nintendo games. But I don't trash it. There'll always be friendly trash talk between us. Oh, you're a Nintendo fanboy. Oh, you're a Sega fanboy. But it never really ruined friendships for me for that. I had a lot of people that tried to bully me and saying, Sonic sucks, or I can't believe you're into that stuff. Nintendo is where it's at because they got Mario, Legend of Zelda, Metroid, which is fine. It was never something I'm into. Like, even now, I'm not into Metroid all that much. Sure, I've picked up Metroid Prime. I had it on GameCube when my sister and I shared a GameCube. She actually ended up taking the GameCube when she moved out, and everything. So, and I've got Nintendo systems. Like, I've got a DS, a 3DS. I have the Switch, and I have a Wii. I mean, the Wii's not the greatest, but I got it for the exclusive games like Tatsunoko vs. Capcom and some of the RPGs. But yeah, I have nothing against it. I will pick up Nintendo games. It's not my favorite. I don't care for a lot of their IPs, and that's just my personal opinion. I have nothing against it. I just prefer the more edgy, arcadey type graphics, which was both a plus and a downfall of Sega, and I'm not afraid to call out Sega on some of the crap. They've made a lot of mistakes, especially with my time being sort of a journalist for Sega fan sites, and delving into the history and a lot of the things that were like questionable, and they shot themselves in the foot a lot, and they still do to this day. But every company has their faults, and I kind of feel as long as you are aware of those faults and you admit them, and you're not going full in on 100% being loyal to a certain brand, that's healthier than if you were 100% on board with whatever decision that they make. Sometimes you just gotta call out companies for what they do. So that's my story. Yeah, so let me know if you have something similar, if you are leaning one way or another, or if you're neutral. That's okay too. By all means, I have a lot of friends that are neutral as well, and I always welcome more. So let me know in the comments down below, and if you like this video, please leave a like. Appreciate it, because I don't make videos like this very often, kind of talk about my personal life and past history with gaming, so this is kind of a new territory for me. So anyway, thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.